Good morning. Good morning. Or if you're listening to this after the morning, it is Sunday morning right now. So if you're listening to this after the fact, welcome. Thank you for listening. Um, Welcome to Swahili Sunday. This is not going to be your normal Swahili Sunday where we are talking about various things with the ladies. I'll give you a quick update and then we'll get into the topic that I want to discuss today. Um, the ladies are doing well. Raised funds last month to get them food packs since they have food now that'll last them through the end of July. So they will. Then for my birthday, I did another fundraiser and raised enough money, I think, that we'll be able to get them into September. So thank you to everybody who has donated. There's still opportunities to donate if you'd like to go to basketsandbeadskenya.org. It is tax deductible, and it'll ensure that the ladies still have food, which they have no ability to earn income or get food there right now during the lockdown. And also, this is the 4th of July weekend. Happy 4th of July to everybody in the U.S. that's celebrating the 4th of July. We have a special going through tonight about 11:30. So if you go to the website basketsbeadskenya.com and use the code July4, you'll get 15% off plus free shipping over $50. So I just wanted to throw that in before we get started. I will say that you'll see across there it says warning trigger alert. So if you're not somebody who this is something that might trigger you, because I'm going to share some pretty deep details about my story in the military and things that happened to me, you might want to not listen to this if it's something that might trigger you. I have to say that the things with Vanessa Gian has caused me a little bit of triggering, because I just brought back the things that happened to me while I was in the military. And as it is Swahili Sunday, I have a Swahili word for harassment, which is unyaya saji. I believe I'm saying that right. So we're talking about harassment today, and in light of what happened to Vanessa in Fort Hood. And I'm sure everybody has seen that, but if you have not seen that, the thing that really bothers me about that case is obviously that she was murdered and then her body was dismembered and she was buried in different places, from what I understand. It's the fact that she went missing on April 22nd, and it took 2 months for her until her family went forward and said, hey, there's a problem, and got a congresswoman involved and got an attorney. Nothing was really done. And here we are in 2020 and things are still being swept under the rug. It's just really it's just really upsetting. It's really, I can't believe this stuff is still happening in the military. And there's been some conflicting accounts and whatever, but I'm sure. And one of the things that bothered me is like, oh, there's no evidence of harassment. Yeah, because she didn't report it, because she was afraid to report it. We still have that fear in the military of women reporting things for fear of reprisal or fear of getting being the one blamed. I'm going to give some examples of some things that I've seen happen over the years. But one thing I'm really frustrated about is a fellow veteran, and I'm sure you've probably seen this if you look down my post, who said about this situation, for those of us who were saying, gosh, it happened to us too. Her quote, "You guys are kidding, right? Sexual harassment is the price of admission for women into the good old boy club. If you're going to cry like a snowflake about it, you're going to pay the price." That is just beginning to be something that's kind of come to the forefront. And for a leader, somebody who was a leader in the Air Force, I'm not sure if she's still in or if she's retired, but just for a leader to have that mentality, there's a real problem with that. Now, I will say that everything I'm going to share, while I am triggered a little bit by it, because it's just, but I have faith in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I have done a lot of work around this. This does not affect my life anymore as far as making me not be able to function, not be able to operate or anything like that. I have done the work on myself to be healed from this. So I am just recounting my story from you. A lot of people, when I posted about it, were like, I had no idea this happened to you. I used to speak on this a lot. I spoke at several women's conferences women in the veteran community about sexual assault in the military. I was interviewed for the movie Women of War, which is, I posted a link to that below. I highly recommend that you go and view that video if you have not. It's very, very eye-opening and telling about what happens, what I guess what some of the problems are and why there's this kind of systemic problem that's been going on for years. Another movie I was interviewed for, but my interview didn't get included, was in it was The Invisible War, but my name is in the credits. So several years ago, when that was coming to the forefront in HR, I think it's 1593, they were trying to push that forward, the STOP Act, to take reporting out of the chain of command, which is the big problem. If you have to report the sexual assault or harassment to your commander may think highly of that other airman or soldier or Marine or sailor, and be like, oh, what are you talking about? That person's good. We're not going to do anything about that. So there's been years and years of work that have gone forward to try to take that reporting out of the chain of command, but I believe it's still in the chain of command. Even though there's an office you can go to, you still have to go through your chain of command, and that is a big problem, especially in a tightly knit unit, and then you end up getting seen as the enemy. I've seen it happen more times than not. I mean, you just think about some of the situations. Let's go all the way back to 1991, Paula Coughlin, the tailhook scandal. And wait a minute, before I get into this, I do want to say for those, because I did see somebody post in a women veterans group saying that, oh, I was raised to not take any stuff and I stood up for myself. Basically kind of, I'm sorry this happened to you ladies. It didn't happen to me, as if to say, it didn't happen to me because I was stronger than you, or you women didn't get raised right, or something like that. I'm sure that's not how it was meant. But for those of you who have been in the military and did not experience that, let me just say that is not the thing to say, because I'm pretty tough and pretty strong. But one of the situations happened to me by a drunken civilian who overtook me and beat me up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So tough or not, there's some situations that doesn't matter how tough you are or how in somebody's face you are, you can still get taken advantage of or taken down. But like I said about the tailhook incident, she was an aviator, and she ended up on the wrong floor of the tailhook convention, and they all knew she was who she was, but they groped her anyway. They surrounded her, groped her, kind of, they didn't rape her, thankfully, but still they assaulted her. And then she went forward and like, I want this reported. I want this stopped. And they were like, whatever, and she ended up, because she reported it, and then they started blaming her. It's her fault. Oh, what were you wearing? That's the big comment you hear from people. What were you wearing? As if what you're wearing brought it on yourself. It's like, you're to blame. You shouldn't have worn this, or you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have said this, or you shouldn't have looked this way. That's just kind of the craziness out there. And then you think about, you may be aware of Lavina Johnson's case, 2005, 15 years ago. She was found in a contractor's tent. She had broken nose, a black eye, loose teeth. There were burns on her genitals from a corrosive chemical that was poured on her. And her weapon was there, and they ruled it a suicide. Despite all that evidence, they ruled it a suicide. And her family they had her body exhumed. They had an independent autopsy done. And it was clearly, and the gunshot wound was not something that was conducive to a suicide. And they were saying that she had a rifle, and that she pulled the trigger with her toe, although her boots were on. So, it's just the disgusting cover-up that goes on. And what's really interesting to me is that here we are 15 years later, and they still have not changed that, because then that means that they have to do an investigation and try to find out who actually did that to her. And it was in a deployed location in Iraq. So, and then here we have Vanessa, who was, it was almost 2 months before anybody did anything to find out what happened to her. and they said she was bludgeoned in her in the armory, and her stuff was still there, and that they cleared her. I read somewhere that they cleared her barracks out and didn't really investigate, like, oh, okay, she's missing, whatever. You know, I just don't understand that. And she said there's reports that say she was afraid, she was going to report the guy who, and if you haven't read the article, there's a link in the post that I posted day before yesterday where I told a little bit of my story about the whole details. It was not somebody that worked directly in her area, but somebody she knew or was working with, or in her unit or something. I'm kind of unclear on that. But she was going to report him, and she told him that. And then the next day she disappears, or the next day she planned on doing it and she disappears. So I'm sure more is going to come out about that, but possibly now there will be more of a spotlight put on military sexual trauma, military sexual assault, harassment, all of those things that have for years been swept under the table. Now, I will say about my military career, I served 23 years in the military, and where I am today, I choose to remember the good part of the 23 years. The bad part is about this much, but I think I need to bring the bad part out so you all know. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a pretty tough chick. I'm a Harley rider. I've been in the military. My mother died when I was 12, so I kind of had to be on my own and raise myself. When I joined the military, it was a way for me to change my life. I was heading down a loser's path. I had dropped out of high school. My father was kind of just barely existing. He actually picked up and moved from Texas to Florida when I turned 18. I came home to an empty house and a note of eviction on the door. So the Air Force was a way for me to get a college education. I had actually looked into going to college. I got my GED and I thought, well, I'll go to college, but what's that going to get me? And I saw a commercial about the Air Force that said, Air Force, a great way of life. And it sounded like an adventure to me, a chance for a different life. So in 1980, they were pushing women to get into non-traditional career fields. So I wanted to be in computers. And when I came in the Air Force, computers was considered an administrative career field, believe it or not. And I tested really, I could have done any job in the Air Force. I had high mechanical scores. They were trying to push me into being an aircraft mechanic or vehicle maintenance or something like that. And I was interested in computers. So I actually went and chose my job at basic training, which interestingly, the way that works, the recruiter's like, oh yeah, you can choose your job when you get there. And I thought, okay, well, he didn't tell me there'd be slim to no chance that job would be available. And when I got there, there were only a few jobs available. And the one I chose, which I didn't know what it was, but you needed a high score to get into it, was contract specialist. And that's proved to be a very lucrative career field for me. I've been a contracts manager and negotiator since I retired from the military. I wrote a book called Think Like a Negotiator. I've done a lot of stuff around contracts management and negotiation. Currently, as many of you know, I'm working with women in Kenya. So I actually took a job as a subcontracts specialist with a defense contractor so I could have some money to pour into the business. Versus taking a loan, and I'm grateful to be able to work from home. But my harassment for me started as soon as I joined the military. So I'm in the military. My TI, training instructor, drill instructor for other services, she was a fireball, and there was a man who was the assistant drill instructor. I didn't have any problems there, but we had been into basic training for a few weeks, and we got liberty to go to the Airmen's Club. And I went to the Airmen's Club, and I really loved music and I loved dancing, and there was a band there and they were playing a song. Now, basic training for the Air Force, for those of you who don't know, is in San Antonio, Texas. That's where I grew up. And this band was playing a song called China Grove, which is about a town by the Doobie Brothers, and it's about a town outside of San Antonio. And they were like, where are you from? And I'm like, here. Well, what happened was one of the members of the band was like, oh, come here, I want to talk to you. Well, his way of talking to me was shoving me in the back, trying to take advantage of me. And luckily I broke away from him. And I thought, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not supposed to be even doing this. I'm going to get in trouble. I just brushed that off. But little did I know that was first in a long line of things that would happen to me. And of course, that was 1980. There was no political correctness back in the 80s. There was a lot of sexual innuendos that were flying around in the unit. That the sexual jokes, sexual comments, those kind of things were normal things that flew around, and there was nothing, some of the commanders were doing it. It was just kind of the supervisors. It was like whatever. There was no line drawn with what was appropriate and what wasn't. So anything kind of went. So it was kind of a culture of just that kind of stuff, and you just kind of brushed it off and ignored it. 1985, I'm only going to talk about a couple of things because I had a lot of things happen to me during my Air Force career at 23 years. I'm going to talk about two significant things that happened to me, one physical and one not physical. So in 1985, I was assaulted and beaten up by a civilian who was like enraged with alcohol. He threw me up against the wall and used me as a punching bag. And then I'm screaming out in pain while he's beating me up. And I remember sliding down the wall, and he's just like, I ended up, I'll tell you what I ended up with in a minute. But so he's beating me up, and then I'm screaming, and we're in a place where other people could hear. So what does he do? He puts his arm around my neck and starts choking me to shut up. And I just remember him saying, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, you bee, shut up." And then I don't remember much after that because I blacked out. And, for whatever reason, I'm still here. God had a purpose for me, and I feel like he stopped that man from ending my life, or I would have been another Vanessa or another Lavina or all the other women that I could list over the years who have died at the hands of men who assaulted them. And I woke up, I had 2 black eyes. This side of my throat was swollen out to my jawline. I had bruises. Thankfully, nothing was broken. I had bruises all up and down my body. I was really hurting. And I went to work the next day, and I went to my supervisor. I was sitting there, and I'm just like, I had glasses on. I covered up, with makeup. This was in the 80s. Like, I'll tell you that nobody in the 80s was paying any attention to domestic violence or rape or assault. It was like something that they didn't want to deal with. It was like, forget it. Don't talk about it. Put it away. Don't, put that over here. We don't want to hear about it. I went to my supervisor because I just couldn't take it. I'm like, I need some help. I went in, I wear glasses. I went in and I took my glasses off and I looked at her, and she saw the black eye. And the only thing she said to me was, "Go talk to the chaplain," and then dismissed me from her office. It was a woman who did that. No, let's go to the first sergeant. Let's go to the commander. I don't know why I started my chain of command, my supervisor. So that I figured, okay, well, if she's not going to do anything, nobody's going to do anything. So I suffered in silence with that. I carried that, and nobody else in the unit knew. I covered up all the bruises with makeup, and it was cold, so I wore the Air Force sweater, and you couldn't see the swelling. So I just suffered in silence and pressed on with it. And about the same time, I remember in another unit, there was a guy, he was active duty, and somehow he was chasing his wife somewhere, and she's in a ditch on base, and he's beating her up in the ditch on base. And, we all heard about it, but then nothing came of it. He got a little slap on the hand, and you pressed on. So that's just the way, that was just the domestic violence side of things, or not domestic violence, which is the violence. Well, for her, was domestic violence. That's the domestic violence side of things that got swept under the rug, and any harassment or assault or anything like that, you just didn't bring up because nobody was going to care. So you either fended people off yourself, or you got assaulted or attacked. That's just the way things were. And it ebbed and flowed throughout my military career. But the thing that really ended my career, which probably was the straw that broke the camel's back, was when I deployed to the Middle East. And what's interestingly, I forgot one of my troops from there is one of my friends on Facebook, and he brought it up and asked me if it was a certain person, and I was like, yeah, that's who it was. So I was master sergeant. I would go over there, and you know, deployed environment is a different kind of environment. You're in a different kind of ops tempo. You know, we were working 18-hour days. We were working 6-7 days a week. My phone was ringing off the hook. My job was, and those under me, was to manage the purchasing, the contracting operation for the base. We were buying stuff. We were one of the few people. We were in Doha, Qatar, and we were one of the few people that had the opportunity or the pass to go into town. And you know, so we're there and we're working, and I don't know. It's probably about the finance team was getting ready to rotate out. It was probably about maybe 3 weeks into my deployment when this other person showed up. He was the same rank as me. And right away, he looked at me and he informed me that I was going to be his while he was there. And what he meant is I was going to be his sex partner. He needed somebody to have sex with while he was there. He had a girlfriend back home, but you know, I was his choice, and I didn't have any choice in that. And I'm like, you know, no, I don't think so. So what he didn't assault me. He didn't touch me. He didn't do anything other than covert psychological warfare. When I stopped him, I was like, no, you're not going to do that. He started doing a lot of psychological things to me. He turned the troops. He kind of got my 2 troops to kind of go. They were like the electricity went out on the base, and well, where is everybody? Well, he had them with him. You know, he was doing that separation to single me out. And then he started doing things to try to get me in trouble on base. He would call people, he would report me to the commander, and we worked for the same commander, and he'd report me to the commander for things, and then he'd start reporting me to headquarters, and he'd call people, and then things would start disappearing from my desk. Like my kids' pictures disappeared. Some of my important paperwork disappeared. And then he was turning people against me and running me down to people. And it was, I don't even know how to describe what it did to me, but there was one person there that I kind of clung to for safety. It was a person I ended up, when I came back, I ended up coming out here to California to be with, and he ended up not being safe. That was a bad move. That's a whole nother situation. But there in that enclosed environment, there was nothing I could do to report it. There was nothing I could do to prove it. And he knew that. And he was doing whatever he could to psychologically break me down. And it worked. And I didn't realize how much it worked. I mean, when you go through something like that for 90 days, 120 days, however many months that went on, I remember the night before I was getting ready to leave, he wasn't around, but one of my other friends and a couple of the other guys got together and they sang the song Elvira, but they put my name Eldana in it. And when they were done, it just hit me, like everything that he had done to me. And I can't describe it in a way to make you understand how psychologically damaging that was. I think that was worse than the assaults and the rapes that I went through in the military and in my life before I joined the military. It was, for me, it broke me. And maybe it broke me because everything else that had happened, and I'd just been dealing with it and sweeping it under the rug. I mean, I was a child of 2 alcoholic parents, so dust it off and go on was a way of life for me. But it broke me. And after they sang that song, I ran to the bathroom and I couldn't stop crying. I think I cried for like an hour nonstop. It was just sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. And the one friend was like, asked somebody to come in and see if I was in there. And like, he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I just sobbed some more. And when I came back from my deployment, you know, you get 2 weeks off, right? Or however much time I think it was a week or whatever, to kind of reintegrate into life. Well, I and I discovered this when I was working on myself later. I scrubbed my house from top to bottom. I scrubbed every corner. I scrubbed every piece of furniture, the floor. I pulled things out and cleaned it, the washer and dryer. I pulled them out. I pulled cabinets out. I moved furniture. I'm just scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing because I was trying to get myself clean, because I felt dirty from what that guy had done to me. And I put in my retirement papers because I knew we were going into Iraq, and I was like, I can't go through this again. This will do me in. And you know, it may sound the way I'm talking about it as it's something simple, really wasn't. It took me a lot of years to work through all of those things that I went through. I mean, I was harassed, I was assaulted, I was raped, I was beaten up, I was, you know, and it wasn't because I was a weak woman. It's just because of the way the culture was, and nobody, like, I saw what happened to women who spoke up. One woman in one of my squadrons, she was sitting there at her desk and had a guy who started massaging her shoulders, and then his hands just quote unquote slipped, and he went like this, you know, tweaky tweaky. And she dealt with it, but then he did something to somebody else, or somebody else accused him of doing something, and then that came out that she did that, and then the whole thing blew up, and it was her fault, and it was her fault. And so I saw what happened to women who reported it. It was all their fault. You got to ask, well, what did you do to make him do that? Or what were you wearing? Or how were you sitting? Or what were you saying? They try to do everything they can to discredit you as a woman, because, you know, it can't possibly be the man, can't possibly be the person who's to blame. It has to be you, the woman, who's done something wrong to make him do that, because he's a good troop otherwise. You know, it must have been you. And so I saw what happened to more than one woman who reported situations that happened to her. I heard about friends who were deployed who reported things before my deployment, which is why I didn't say anything, because that would have made it worse for me. And when you're in a deployed environment, you're locked down with only a certain amount of people, and you can't afford to have like all of those people kind of after you, so to speak. So I retired from the military. I came back, I put in my papers, and I retired. And it wasn't because I really wanted to retire. It's because I knew that I could not tolerate any more of that. I couldn't take any more of that. If anything further happened to me, I would have broken under the pressure. And I ended up breaking later, which was probably the best thing that happened to me, because like I said, that guy in the Middle East that was like my safe haven there, he proved to be a safety valve for me there. But when I got out and I came to be with him, he was not a safety valve at all. And as a matter of fact, was just as destructive as many of the people that I'd encountered in the military. And we had started a business together. He cut me out of the business. He left me for somebody else. He took all the money, cleaned out the bank accounts, kind of left me hanging high and dry. And I had just started to do some work on myself. I was going to a counselor, a group. I was actually going to a group at a VA, a vet center at the VA, and it was a group for women who had been traumatized, assaulted, or harassed, or raped in the military. And I was making a lot of progress. And when this guy left, it was just kind of like, oh, I can now feel my feelings. And here's all the stuff I've never felt in my life. And if anybody knew me at that time, there's only a few people that were around that saw what I went through. That was 2005. It wasn't that long ago. But I pretty much had a breakdown, and I probably cried for about 6 months. I had to actually take some medication to stop crying, because I couldn't stop crying, because I was dealing with all that pain that I'd never dealt with, because I was somebody who stuffed it. That's what I learned as a kid. When you grow up in an alcoholic family, you learn that you got to stuff it and move on, because this is just the way life is. That's the same thing I did in the military. Anytime something happened to me, I stuffed it and moved on. Well, that forced me to deal with it. And I looked in the mirror and I realized that I was the problem, and I was also the solution. The interesting thing was that I had faith in God then, but I was not leaning on him and turning it over to him. But I started to do a lot of work. I started to grow my faith again, and I started to really look at myself and clean those things out and work on those things and release those things and know that it's something that happened to me, but it's not who I am. It's not something, and I know there's parts of my life that it still affects. Uh, I'm alone, and I'm not in a relationship, and people are like, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" There's nothing wrong with me. It's just not happened for me for whatever reason. And I know that having faith in God is something that helps me get through. I don't have a lot of close friends. And I'm sure that that has something to do with everything that I've been through in my life. I have mostly I have a lot of male friends because I was in a male dominated world in the military, and have a great veterans group at Saddleback Church that we meet online now. So if any of you are vets and would like to meet with a group, that they have been, they've been a real rock for me. They've lifted me up in prayer when I've gone through things, and they've listened to me when I've shared these stories, and they've supported me in anything I'm doing, including my work in Kenya. So I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that happened to me. I'm not going to share about 23 years of stuff, but those are a couple significant things that happened to me. But the key there is it's this much of a 23-year career in the military. I'm proud that I got to serve in the military. The military, on the good part, helped me. I made the rank of master sergeant. It helped me. I got a degree while I was in the military. It gave me training in a good career field. I had the opportunity to lead and to mold and change lives. And it's interesting that my one troop, when he was asking me about this, was like, "Oh, why didn't you say anything?" Well, I was the supervisor. I was a leader. I couldn't let my troops like, "Hey, this is happening to me. Help me out." I had to be there for them. I couldn't have them be there for me. That I just needed to make sure that they were okay and that they were, taken care of. So I learned how to lead. I learned how to actually get over my fear of speaking in front of people. I used to be afraid, petrified to speak in front of people. If I would have had to done something like this or get up on a stage to speak, I was even going before a board. I was the outstanding worker, and I got put up for a lot of awards boards, but I never did well at the boards because I was so nervous because people were looking at me. So that's another thing the military did for me, enabled me to get up in front of a group of people and actually speak to people, and it helped actually pave my way to become a speaker. So if anybody wants to come on and share their experience, you can click on the link there. I can bring you in. If not, I just wanted to share a little piece of my story. And anybody else who this has happened to, I think now's the time that we need to all band together and stand up and stand together as sisters and say, look, this is enough. Something needs to change in the military culture. It's not changed in years and years and years. And it's time, finally, maybe this is the time something will change. This is the time when the organizations like Protect Our Defenders and the bill HR 1593 will get passed to take the reporting out of the chain of command, so it won't just be swept under the rug, so it won't just be cast aside, so it won't be ignored, and it won't be the woman who's blamed. Some of the facts that came out again about Vanessa were that, the one thing that just sits in my head is like, oh, well, we have no evidence to suggest there was any harassment. Okay, really? Just because you had no evidence, does that mean there wasn't harassment? What I don't understand is why somebody didn't do something sooner. And then there's other people that are coming up missing as well that aren't women. There's a lot of young men that are coming up missing too. I don't know what's going on at Fort Hood, but not only Fort Hood, across our military service, something needs to stop. Something needs to change. Women shouldn't have to have this experience and have this as part of their experience of being in the military. And our leaders need to step up once and for all and put a stop to it. There's all kinds of training, and there's all kinds of I remember, and I put it in my post. By the way, I suggest you all go and watch that movie, Women of War. It's on my timeline, on my personal profile, Eldana Lewis Fernandez, or you can look on YouTube, Women of War. I'll put a link in this as well, so you can have a link right to it. It's about an hour and a half, but it's really enlightening. They have a psychologist that they've interviewed, and they have a lot of good factual data. I have an interview in there, and they've interviewed some of the other women that things have happened to as well. It's a very important topic to take a look at. So hopefully this has been something encouraging for you all. I just want to encourage you that my assault and my abuse and everything that happened to me is not the end of the story. The person I am today, I'm at peace, I'm happy, I'm joyous, I'm free, I'm doing something to make a difference in the lives of other women in Kenya. And that's my purpose, that's my passion, that's the purpose that God has for me. I'm grateful to God for being able to heal from this. And anybody who's out there who has not done some work around healing from it, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. It was painful, it was tough. Like I said, I cried for 6 months, but it wasn't only the things that happened to me in the military. It was also the childhood I grew up in with alcoholic parents, and my mother being a raging alcoholic and dying of alcoholism when I was 12. My father basically shutting down and not parenting me and not guiding me, not giving me the guidance. There was a lot of that I had to deal with. But I'm here to say that on the other side of that sewer you have to go through of your own destructive past, there is freedom. I put my faith in God, and I know Jesus drugged me through that because I kept my eye on him the whole time. That's what worked for me, and it can work for you too. But you do have to face it and realize that the person looking in the mirror back at you is an awesome, amazing, powerful, beautiful woman. And she can heal from it, and she can have a happy, joyous, and free life. I'm here to again say that's my life today. I'm grateful for the opportunities I have. I'm grateful for doing the work to heal from this. And for those of you who have not yet, you can too. And speak up, say something about your experience. The more of us that speak up and talk about it, the more that they can't sweep this under the rug anymore. I think this is the catalyst that is going to move this situation forward and make it have a big spotlight, a big black eye on the military, and something that now and going forward in the future may be able to be stopped and may not happen again. Women need to be believed. And this is the first time I think that finally, after all the different things that have happened, there may be some justice for women in the military, and some men too. There have been some men, although it's a smaller amount, there have been some men who also have experienced this as well. And it shouldn't happen to anybody. So I hope you all have a great Sunday. I actually I was feeling a little anxious about sharing this. I actually feel good about it. The thing about putting your story out in the public, you have trolls and those people who want to tear you down. I've already had one I had to block and remove, who put a bunch of stupid memes on my post, kind of making fun of the situation. And then we had that lieutenant colonel from the Air Force who made that comment about basically, if it happened to you, it's just part of the being in the military as a woman, which I totally disagree with. So I hope you all have a great Sunday, and I hope that your 4th of July weekend has been good. Again, if you want to support the ladies in Kenya, July 4 is the code. You can get 15% off at basketsofbeadskenya.com. And I hope you have a great day. Nakupenda.